Hey Chris, I'm Anna.
Hi Anna, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So start off. Can you tell us about your sort of musical journey? How you ended up in this career?
That's a very fair question. I think I'm pretty fortunate in that from when I could think about what I wanted to do when I grew up, it's been this. So I feel really fortunate that I get to do what I love to do, and I don't think it happens that often where someone knows what they want early and goes on to do it. And so as much as it's still a job, and sometimes the job still sucks, I still feel very fortunate to get to tell stories with music, and I love doing it.
So speaking of sort of being fortunate, being on a show like Wednesday,
right?
That's got to be huge. Were you a fan of the Addams Family from like the old movies, or?
I think for me, it was like I had more of an awareness to it of it, and then this show has retroactively made me a fan of it. I mean, of course, I was very much aware, and I knew Wednesday, and I knew the cousin It, and I knew the Uncle Fester, all those things and Thing, but I didn't know the lore as well as I did, and so now I'm very well versed and we've gone back and taken a look. But I think Wednesday for me was a really spectacular, immersion into that world.
There's something interesting with the Addams Family and anything related to it, especially with the music.
Right.
Everyone knows the snaps and the. So how is having something like that? How does it change the way that you jump into a project like Wednesday?
Right. Well, there's something. I mean, it's something that has connected multi-generationally for a reason, right? And going back to that theme has been around since it was black and white. And when we set out to do this, we weren't setting out to do an homage, but we also weren't trying to pretend that didn't happen. Even though this is something different with a focus on Wednesday specifically, Tim Burton said, why don't we find a few places to sprinkle this in? And all we had to do was and there were maybe half a dozen places in the whole series, but if you want to give that little wink and that little nod, have a harpsichord go da-da-da-dum, that's it. And sometimes da-da-da-dum. But yeah, it was really great to have that little nugget to be able to have people grab onto, or not. Sometimes it's subtle, but to have that for people to recognize and connect with, it was really fun.
Yeah. How involved was Tim Burton with the music?
Very, very involved. He's, and especially on the episodes that he directed and collaborated with Danny Elfman on, because their relationship goes back 40 years. But he's very hands-on, and when he likes it, he really likes it, and the process, the challenge becomes getting to that point where you recognize that he likes it, because he won't give many notes beyond that. But yeah, he's very collaborative. Obviously he's Tim Burton. He's Tim Burton for a reason, and the language that he speaks with his visuals and the way that he tells stories, it lends itself to music very well. So it was a real honor to get to do that.
Do you find that's very common? Do you find that a lot of filmmakers are really involved, or do you,
Yeah, I mean, because music is it ends up being, it sounds kind of pretentious to say, but it becomes a character in and of itself. And so everybody wants a musical thumbprint for their show, whether they want it thematic or whether they want it to be more textual or electronic orchestral, but they all want something that doesn't sound like other shows. And so it ends up becoming an emotional translator, almost like, tell me what you want this to feel like, and then translating that into music and what instruments are going to be able to work well to tell that particular story.
Do you find yourself creating themes for characters or episodes, or
Yes.
Yes.
And like Wednesday, for example, there was a Wednesday theme that was for her specifically, but also kind of used overall throughout the show, that we could mix and match and present in different ways, but also their individual character themes. Sometimes a theme that would show up just for one episode based on whatever the thematic elements of that episode was. But and that was one of the fun things about Wednesday, was being so overtly thematic and melodic with it.
When you're working on shows, do you generally get the full locked episode or dailies? Or?
It depends. I think in episodic work, generally it's more common to get something that's locked or close to it, because there's just not time to make a lot of musical changes. But certainly in movies, it's changing all the way up until and past the point that they can actually make changes.
Do you remember the first movie or TV show that the music really spoke to you?
Oh, the first one that really spoke to me. When I was in high school in the mid '90s, we would friends would drive around with the windows down, listen to Pearl Jam and Nirvana, and like crank that up. I would drive around with my windows down, my little CD disc changer, listening to Jurassic Park and Sneakers and Stargate, and that was just, and I also had Nirvana and Pearl Jam sprinkled in there, and some U2. But those were really seminal soundtracks, and I'm leaving many out. But those are some of the things that just inspired me to want to go on to do this.
Is there a genre that you really love, particularly love scoring for or composing for, rather?
I love getting to be melodic and thematic. I love fantasy. I love sort of action adventure, but I also love to get to be quiet and pretty too. So it's kind of what I like it where the music can be featured, where it's not trying to blend into the background. Sometimes that's the absolute right thing to do, but I think where I have the most fun is getting to be melodic and express it that way.
If you weren't composing, what do you think you'd be doing?
I always the only other thing that I was really thought maybe I could do this was architecture. I've always loved the floor plan design and flow and style, and looking at why things work a certain way with textures and materials and glass and steel and brick and stone. So maybe I would say the architecture is something I've always had a fascination and love for.
And finally, what do you think is sort of your holy grail of movie, TV composing?
My own?
Both. How about both?
Okay.
Let's hear both.
Now, I would say I love Bernard Herrmann. I think that the Scene d'Amour and Vertigo is just something that wrecks me every time. And the main title to North by Northwest, it's just, I love those things. And if I could ever achieve something close to that, I would be like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to die. So that's.
And then, what about from your projects? What's sort of your holy grail?
I'm going to go with Wednesday, just because it's the most recent, and there are a lot of fun moments in it. And I think that, again, the fact that it connected on a level that was so kind of universal is unique, and it's really gratifying to have something that moves people that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.